I want to talk very briefly here about this Hulk Hogan story. Hulk Hogan was back in the news for all the wrong reasons this week, and I want to. I first read the story. I'll give credit here to Fightful.com because I read this and I just thought to myself, I don't know what he's thinking. I think Hogan would be best suited to keep a low profile at this point when it comes to doing interviews like this. But this was the first interview I believe that he gave, first formal interview that he gave since the backstage meeting at the Extreme Rules pay-per-view when he met with the WWE roster. And Hogan was on the debut episode of the Apter Chat, which is a new podcast from Bill Apter, who I've had the pleasure of interviewing here on this show before. He's a wrestling royalty, is Bill Apter. And he's known Hogan for many, many, many years. And Hogan talked about being blackballed by the company after the tape leaked many years ago and the racist comments came out. And so he was talking about that. And about the meeting at Extreme Rules, this is what Hogan said. He said, a lot of people accepted my apology. And a lot of people heard what they wanted to hear. And a lot of the narrative that came out of the meeting was on point. A lot of the narrative was very different. I was surprised to hear some people interpreted what I said, that I was only sorry I got caught. One of the criticisms of the meeting was the fact that they took the approach of not only, apologizing, but you got to be careful because in an age of social media and cell phone cameras and hidden cameras, you never know what or when you may be recorded. And I can understand why people would look at that and go, this guy's full of shit. This guy's not sorry at all. He's sorry he got caught. He's more concerned about warning people, hey, I got caught on a secret recording. I got screwed here. I was done dirty, and you guys should make sure that the same thing doesn't happen to you. I'm not saying that any of that is wrong, and it's not right at all that Hogan was secretly recorded. But that's a completely separate issue. Your first time back in the locker room, this is your mea culpa. You're meeting with the entire locker room. You have the forum open to yourself to say whatever you want to say. All he had to do was apologize. That's it. All he had to do was say, I'm supremely embarrassed by this. It's not who I am. It's not in my heart. And all I can do is apologize and just hope that I conduct myself in a way where hopefully one day everybody can forgive me and give me a second chance. Something along those lines, boom, done. And that doesn't mean that everybody has to forgive him, but that's all he had to do. But when I heard about the account of that meeting and how, well, there was a whole other component to it, and he's talking about social media and privacy, that was not the time or place for that. That was not a locker room, I don't think, that was there to hear about Hulk Hogan bitch about how he, basically he got caught and didn't know he was being recorded. So that was his big mistake coming out of that meeting. But if you remember, when the meeting was over, New Day put out a joint statement, Titus O'Neil put out a statement, and they didn't seem like they were so willing and so quick to forgive Hogan. It's not that they're closed off to the idea, but Titus O'Neil in particular, I think, said that there was absolutely nothing in that meeting that Hogan said that convinced him that he was really, truly sorry for what he had done. So clearly there were some people who came out of that meeting not with a very favorable impression of Hogan, but where he put his foot in his mouth here is this next comment that he made. And this is where I just kind of shook my head. He said, I just hope the Brotherhood can get back to the way it was. Outside the ring, you're supposed to protect your brother. In this case, and I did laugh a little bit, him using the word brother, because he just uses that word all the time. So I'm reading this, and literally I'm like, I hear his voice in my head saying this. So it's like, yeah, outside the ring, you're supposed to protect your brother. But he says, in this case, it's a situation where 75, 80, 90% of the wrestlers are protecting me, and they're giving me another chance to move forward. They're just a few wrestlers that don't understand the bond and the brotherhood of wrestling. So we all know who he's calling out with those comments. He says, if somebody makes a mistake, you need to forgive them. You need to forgive them, he says, and move on and try to let them prove themselves. Now, I will give Hogan, I will say this much about one thing that he said in this interview. He said that at the meeting was it Pittsburgh, I guess, he asked if anybody had any questions for him. He said the only person who stood up to ask a question was Mark Henry. Okay, and then he had this quote. He said, I just wanted to be able to, if anybody had any questions or anybody had anything at all to say at the time, I really wanted them to say it to my face so I could address it. Hopefully, understand the issue and have a chance to get them to understand me. And I do think that's a fair point that Hogan makes, if what he's saying is true. Okay, it's Hogan here, so we have to take, his account of things we have to take with a grain of salt here. But I will say that I agree with him on that point. If there were people who still had serious concerns and serious reservations about him or how genuine he was being, and I don't care if it was just a case of they didn't, people there were afraid to say anything, maybe they didn't want to get in the bad graces of Triple H or Vince McMahon and cause a scene in front of their employer, whatever the excuse is. If you have an issue with Hogan, you should raise your hand and confront the guy, even if you just go off to the side so nobody hears you and nobody sees you, and say, hey, Hulk, I'd like to talk to you for a second. I mean, Titus has some pretty strong words for him. Why didn't Titus pull him aside and have a conversation with him? And even if Titus just said, look, I'm not asking you a question. I have a statement, a comment I'd like to make. I just want you to listen. I just want you to hear what I have to say. Apparently they didn't do that, and I think that they should have. If Hogan put the forum out there for anybody to speak up and, hey, if you got something to say to me, please come say it to my face, then you know what? They should have said it to his face. Or they should have pulled him aside and said it. And they could still put their public statement out. I thought that the statements New Day and Titus put out were very classy and well-worded, and it was fine. But I'll give Hogan points for that. He's got a point there. But this thing about how wrestling is a brotherhood and how you've got to forgive and just move on, I'm sure Hogan would love it if everybody forgave him and just moved on and acted like it never happened. I am sure that that's what Hogan wants. But what is this brotherhood bullshit when it comes to, you were caught on tape saying racist shit. You were saying some pretty horrible racist shit on tape. I don't, however many years ago it was, and your privacy was violated, that's horrible, but it happened. You can't put the genie in the bottle. These people obviously were offended by this, and I'm sure in some cases these are people that respected Hogan. Maybe they grew up on Hogan, they liked Hogan, and then they hear something like that, and of course they're going to be hurt. Of course it's going to bother them, and it's going to be tough for them to just turn around and be like, all right, I forgive you. All is forgiven. It's all water under the bridge. Right? I don't blame any of them for feeling the way they feel, but this bullshit about a brotherhood, I just wish the brotherhood could go back to the way it was. This isn't you being in a match, giving your body to somebody and saying, hey, brother, we're all on the same page here. You protect me, I'll protect you. This is not a fucking match. You said a bunch of racist bullshit. And surprise, surprise, some of the black wrestlers on the roster aren't so quick to say you're forgiven. Which is certainly an opinion that they are entitled to have. They don't ever have to forgive Hogan if they don't want to. And Titus, I know his kids and his family is very important to him, and I'm sure that bothers him as well. He's being very careful about how he conducts himself. He's trying to set a good example for his kids, and I get that. But when I read that one quote from Hogan about, the brotherhood isn't what it used to be, and I wish it could go back to the way it was, and if you make a mistake, you got to forgive them. That's a pretty big fucking mistake to make, though. Right? I mean, come on. If you go back and listen to the comments, it's not hard to understand why these people would be so upset. So I think the Brotherhood comment was just complete bullshit. He did himself no favors by making that comment. It was a stupid thing for him to say. But I will say that, yeah, if he open the forum for people to ask questions and confront him and talk to him at the meeting, then if people had real issues with him, they should have, gone to him face to face to at least let him know face to face how they really feel. But I think it would be safer for Hogan to not give interviews like this anymore. If this is his idea of damage control, he's not going to do himself any favors by doing more interviews like this.